You've probably heard the phrase a million times, right? Someone talking about their personal relationship with God. It's everywhere in certain Christian circles, but what does that actually mean? Like, how do you have a one-on-one connection with the divine being? Today, we're going to unpack this really popular and sometimes, honestly, confusing idea.
And hey, if you've ever heard that phrase and felt a little weird about it, you are definitely not alone. For a lot of people, like this user on the Christianity subreddit, trying to think about it can feel kind of forced or just unnatural. It really makes you wonder, what are people even talking about when they say that?
Well, people who use the term have a lot of ways to describe it. One of the biggest analogies you'll hear is this one: becoming best friends with God. The idea here is that God isn't some distant, formal king on a throne. He's someone you can have a real, close, personal bond with.
You'll also hear this phrase a lot: intimacy with God. This one really gets at a deep, vulnerable kind of connection. It's about moving past just knowing facts about God to truly knowing His character, His heart, on a really profound level.
But this is the classic. This is the phrase at the center of it all: having a personal relationship with Jesus. So that's our core question today. What does this actually look like in real life? And where did this whole idea even come from in the first place?
All right, let's really dig into what's at the heart of this idea. Fundamentally, it's about a huge shift in perspective. Think about it like this. There's a difference between someone you just know of, like a celebrity, and a close friend you actually truly know. Proponents of this idea say that's the exact kind of shift we're talking about when it comes to God.
And when they use the word relationship, they don't mean it casually. They often point back to the original biblical languages, where the word for know is so much more than just having information in your head. It means a deep, committed, covenant-level connection. Think of the bond in a marriage or between lifelong friends. It's all about being truly and intimately connected.
Okay, so where did this concept even come from, theologically speaking? Well, it's rooted in this grand, sweeping story of a perfect friendship that was lost and then, very dramatically, restored.
This is so interesting because it basically maps out that entire story arc. It starts in the Garden of Eden, where humanity is said to have had this direct, face-to-face friendship with God. But then, sin enters the picture and breaks that connection, creating separation. And the huge turning point in this story is the death of Jesus on the cross. That scene is the moment the barrier was torn down, restoring direct, personal access to God for absolutely everyone, not just for special priests or prophets.
And this verse right here is one people point to as a game changer. It's seen as this radical redefinition of the entire dynamic. It's a move away from a formal master and servant kind of relationship to one of genuine friendship, where God actually wants to share His heart with people. Okay, so we've covered the what and the why, but what about the how? I mean, practically speaking, how do people actually go about building or cultivating this kind of relationship? Let's break down the common advice.
So what's the game plan? Well, when you boil it all down, the advice for building a relationship with God sounds an awful lot like the advice for any healthy relationship, really. It comes down to these 4 key things. First up, consistent communication. And we're not just talking about formal, on-your-knees prayer. This is more about an ongoing, all-day-long conversation, just talking to God wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Second, intentional time. This is about carving out dedicated moments to just connect. Not necessarily to study about God, but to spend time with God. You know, maybe it's just quietly reading a psalm on the couch or going for a walk and taking in the world around you. Number 3 is a tough one: trust in pain. The thinking here is that, just like in our human friendships, it's the really difficult times that either break a bond or make it incredibly strong. So learning to trust God when things are hard is seen as absolutely essential to deepening that connection. And finally, and this one is super important for what comes next, fellowship with others. This is key because it shows that even the biggest proponents of a personal relationship say it was never meant to be a totally private solo mission. It's strengthened and grown inside a community.
But that's not the whole story. Just when the idea of a personal relationship seems to make sense, there's a really strong counter-argument that comes from within Christianity itself, and it basically questions that entire framework.
The main question from critics, like the writer Chad Bird, is a pretty bold one. Is this whole concept even in the Bible? They make the very solid point that the exact phrase personal relationship with Jesus appears literally nowhere in Scripture. 0 times.
And this right here really gets to the heart of the disagreement. The critics argue that the biblical model for faith isn't a private, solo journey, this Jesus and me idea. Instead, they say it's presented as a corporate, communal reality. Believers are part of one body, the church. I mean, they even point to the Lord's Prayer. It starts with our Father, not my Father.
And this quote really sums up the number one concern from this point of view. The fear is that a faith that becomes too personal, too private, runs the risk of us creating a God in our own image, a God who just happens to agree with all our opinions, bless all our plans, and never really challenges us to change.
So where does that leave us? Are these two ideas just completely at odds with each other? A personal connection versus a communal body? Or is there maybe a way to bring these two perspectives together?
Well, here's what's so fascinating. When you look closer, even the most passionate advocates for a personal relationship are huge on community. They argue that this kind of relationship simply cannot happen in a vacuum. They say that being in fellowship with other believers isn't just a nice add-on, it's vital. It's where your faith gets tested, sharpened, and protected from becoming self-centered.
So, in the end, it might not be an either-or situation at all. The synthesis, the way these ideas come together, seems to be this. Many see it as a deeply personal journey of faith, but one that is absolutely meant to be lived out, strengthened, and held accountable within a communal family of fellow believers.
Which leaves us with a final question to chew on. Is faith ultimately more like a private one-on-one conversation, or is it more like a loud, messy, and beautiful family meal? And maybe the whole point is that it has to be both.